Abe, true to Christ. Hey everybody, this is Catholic Trash Talk, and today we are going to be talking about purifying with the Jesus challenges. So, reminder, these are radical like Jesus challenges from Greg Steer's 21 revolutionary challenges and Jesus challenges book. I will have a playlist on my channel called Radical Like Jesus challenges. If you want to see the other videos and have other challenges, this is meant to be short videos that challenge your faith and give you different things to practice to deepen your faith life and your prayer life as well. But it's also a way to point out the dangerous parts of Catholicism, of Protestantism, to call out my Protestant self, to think more deeply about our faith. So let me get the video set up and we'll get right into it.
Interesting incident that took place in the ministry of Jesus that a lot of believers think only happened once, but it actually happened twice. Once at the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, once at the end of the ministry of Jesus. And it was a cleansing of the temple. So there was a bad habit that had happened in the religious community among the Jews, and many were selling animals for sacrifices at exorbitant prices to the Jews who were coming to make their sacrifices in Jerusalem. And Jesus was upset that they had turned this house of prayer to a den of robbers. And so literally made a whip and went through flipping tables, driving people out, and it says he drove out all the money changers. And this is a huge area. I've been up where the temple was built, and it is a huge space in Jerusalem. So Jesus, literally hundreds of money changers, maybe even thousands, that he drove out. Again, once at the beginning of his earthly ministry and once at the end of his earthly ministry. And it gives us a perspective into how Jesus viewed sin. And he hated it. And the question that we should ask ourselves is, do we hate sin? We're going to be talking about what it means to flip tables, not in the temple area, but in the temple of our souls. What is that one sin that is holding you back? That one sin that if Jesus were to show up in all of his glory and with his holy eyes pierce into your soul, what would that sin you'd be most ashamed by? Well, my prayer and the challenge for today is that you would flip that table of sin in your heart and in your life. So here's the challenge. I want you to identify that singular sin that you'd be most embarrassed by if Jesus were to suddenly show up in all of his glory. And I want you to flip the table. I want you to deal with that sin. I want you to call a trusted friend and let them know what that sin is. You confess it. Now, we confess to God for forgiveness. 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sin, he's faithful and just and will forgive us our sin and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. We confess to God for forgiveness, but as somebody once said, we confess to each other that we may be healed. James 5:16, confess your sins one to another that you may be healed. So I want to challenge you to do that. Flip that table of sin, confess that sin to a trusted friend.
So I think that he has a good idea with this one. I don't see any errors or any heresies as far as I can tell. But one thing that I would say is we have to go even deeper with the idea of what is the sin that's holding you back. You got to reflect on what are the agreements you're making with sins. Because one of the things that we get lost in, especially in Protestantism, is we get this idea of Satan made me do that. Satan made me do this. But who's the one who co-signed the sin? Yeah, you might have been coerced into it, but like, who still did it? And so if you still did it, how much of it is your responsibility? You got to really think about that. If you were like forcefully coerced, you don't really have culpability in doing that sin. You had no choice. You were literally forced into doing it. But if it's more of like Satan influenced you, how did that happen? I mean, you had to at least let him at some capacity do that to you, right? So we have to remember that we are making agreements with sins. And so we have to stop allowing ourselves to make those agreements with sins and to make contracts with sin. And so there's an easy solution, which we can go even deeper with this. My challenge to you guys is don't just think about, what's that one sin holding you back, or what are the agreements you're making with sins. Solve it. So you do it in a 6-step process. Identify why, feelings, responsibility, love, and confess. So any sin that you guys are able to recognize that this is the sin that's holding me back, deeply think about it and think, what agreements did I make to get to that point? You're identifying the problem. You're identifying the sin. And you have to get to, why did you do it? So that's what we're talking about here, of thinking about what brought me to this point. What was the agreements that I made with sin? And then you need to figure out what is the feeling that you felt when you made that agreement with sin. For me, when I feel great shame, I feel like there's this icky, wet feeling right here that just drapes over me. And it feels like a dread right in here in my chest. And so if you're able to recognize the feeling, you can know when you're feeling that temptation, or when you're feeling that sin, or when you're feeling those emotions that lead you to that sin. And that is going to be half the battle, just noticing that. Then you have to realize what is your responsibility, because you got to take responsibility for your actions, otherwise you're not going to change. You have to love yourself, and you have to love everybody that was part of that situation. And you have to confess your sins. Now, in this case, for this exercise, it doesn't matter if you confess it to someone else or your priest, but eventually you will want to confess your sins to the priest so you can receive absolution. But think of confessing to somebody else as like a trial period to get comfortable with confessing sins, because you need to be comfortable with confessing sins. That's the last thing. So again, the challenge for you is every day, think about at least one sin that holds you up. What are the agreements you're making with it? And identify what the sin was, why you did it. What do you feel when you experience that sin? What responsibility do you need to take? How can you love yourself? And did you confess, and are you comfortable with confessing that sin? But anyways, guys, that's everything. Feel free to bully me in the comments and tell me why I'm wrong. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. God bless, and peace be with you all. Bye.